All right, this is the first episode of my new podcast. It's called The Visionary Pathways. Reason it's called The Visionary Pathways is I'm going to be interviewing entrepreneurs, and the first guest actually inspired me to start this podcast. It's Dave right here. Dave, what's up, dude? Welcome to the podcast. First guest, Dave Batcheller. He has over 20 years of experience in the agricultural and technology business, and great dude, great person. Oh, he's also writing a book at the moment. Also has 3 daughters, man of faith, great guy. I'm gonna be asking him some questions about his story, how he started his business, how he grew his business, and how he got to the point he is today. Dave.
Fire away there.
So Dave, you have over 20 years of experience in the agricultural industry and technology industry. From what I understand, you created products and software that can be integrated into machinery that is used in the agricultural business. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
How did you get to that point? First of all, what motivated you to be a business owner or a manager at a high level like you did in your career?
I think I lucked into it in a lot of ways. I had a father who was a serial entrepreneur, and when I was a kid, he was founding businesses, starting businesses, growing businesses. Either first as an employee of a company, and then later he was starting them on his own. So when I was 5 years old, he started the first business that he had that was really outside of his employer, an entrepreneurial venture, and from a little kid's age, kind of watched him grow those things up. And I think when you grow up in an entrepreneurial environment, you grow up with this knowing that that's always an option, that you can start your own thing. That is accepted, encouraged. It's a path that just feels natural. I think if you grow up in a household of serious athletes that are training all the time, then you're training all the time as a kid. And then when you come into young adulthood, you have a certain discipline. There's just an expectation for how things go. And I think a lot of people who grow up in entrepreneurial households, they feel the same way. It's like, hey, for some people, starting a business or starting this thing out is this crazy, scary, unreachable thing that feels like you can't approach it because there's so much that's unknown. And I think when you grow up in an entrepreneurial household, you just don't feel that way. It feels like there's nothing that you can't do. And so when I finished my undergraduate, I told my dad, who had started another business, that I would help him out for 1 year in the family business. And he was at the time the director of technology at John Deere, and he was retiring from John Deere, and that meant he couldn't work in agriculture for 5 years. So we had to find something else to do. He had a friend that was really into flying, the private pilot. My dad grew up with an aviator as a father, so they thought we would start a business in consumer aviation products, and we started making some products in the aviation space. And I think a lot of times when you start a thing out, there's this feeling like you've got to have the right thing. Like you have to figure, you've got to know exactly where you're going. You've got to stay on this path, rigidly on this path, and your target needs to be the right target. Your method needs to be the right method. Your direction needs to be the right direction. And I find that that's almost never the case. Like with all the businesses we've started, all the entrepreneurs I know, you start out in a direction and it's really badly informed. You just have some excitement and a belief that something makes sense and you're running off after that thing. And along the way, you discover you're wrong, horrifically, terribly, awfully, like unfixably wrong in some respect. Then you need to change. Then you need to move in a different direction to say, okay, I'm wrong. Now I'm going to follow the market. You just let yourself run in the right direction until you get smart enough and you have enough encounters with enough customers about the thing that you're trying to do, and you stay curious about what they think about it. You ask them questions. You try to pull that thread, learn more and more from the market. And then once you've got a little bit of momentum, you let the market inform the rest of the direction. You just follow it, and go where it says that you should go. And I think that a lot of early stage ventures, die a death of never trying. People never try because they They just don't feel like they can. And then they're forced to do that really kind of awful thing that we all have to do sometimes, which is, you know, the thing that you talk about. Like, you sit down in a conversation like this with somebody, some friend, some guy, and you guys talk about, wouldn't it be great if there was an app like this, a podcast like this, a product like this? Why doesn't someone do XYZ thing? Like, you recognize the need for the existence of the thing. And then 9 months later, a year later, 2 years later, whatever, you're sort of forced to watch what you knew needed to happen reflected back at you in the form of something someone else did, right? That they got a lot of value out of, that they took advantage of, the great opportunity that they've seized. And then you can even see them from a distance in their success. And then you kind of feel stupid about it, right? Like, I knew that that thing needed to happen. I knew that that thing needed to exist. Like, I could have done all of those things, been that person, experienced that success, but I chose not to. I didn't take a shot at it. So often I think we live our lives in a place where we're forced to like encounter our own intuition and reflect it back at us in ways that can kind of feel a little embarrassing. And if you get over that hump and you just try, then for a certain period of time, it's just being curious and persevering, just allowing yourself to go far enough that you get an understanding for the jungle that you're in, and you can try to figure your direction to your objective. So for me, I always felt like I could do these things. I had a network of people around me that were entrepreneurial, that were willing to just leap in, and I followed them for a certain period of time, just not knowing that that wasn't the way that everybody did things. And along the way, we started building one successful business, but it was in a much different direction than we originally expected. And then we started another business, and that right away, the direction was good. We started to experience a lot of success. It took on a life of its own. And as we went, we started 5 businesses over the 20-year period that I was working, both in this space, both in business-to-business businesses and business-to-consumer businesses. And they were all different, all had a life of their own, all started in, one direction with one idea for what they would ultimately look like. Every single one ended up someplace significantly different. And I think that that's an important flexibility to take. So I got into it essentially as a family trade. And now that I've experienced it, and you've got that freedom and that control and that ability to go wherever things should go and make quick decisions. And then you find yourself in a larger corporate organization where there's a lot of bureaucracy and things feel very slow, and you don't feel like you can seize the moment. That becomes really difficult to tolerate. So I think the entrepreneurial experience is awesome, and it's amazing, and it teaches you so much, and you grow so fast. But it also ruins you a little bit in the context of learning how to be an employee in a different environment, a slower environment, a more risk-averse, conservative environment. Because when I think in a lot of spaces, entrepreneurism feels like life or death always. Every decision feels like it's got a lot of consequence. Every decision feels like it needs to be correct. All the decisions feel like they need to happen very quickly. And in a lot of cases, they really do. And then when you go into a space where that isn't the culture and you find yourself railing against it, there's just a lot of friction. Things feel really uncomfortable. It becomes difficult. So I think, entrepreneurism is a great place for people to go. It's a great place to create enduring value societally, because that's where cool creation happens. It's in that 0 to 1. It's that creating that new thing. It's filling that gap that the world needs to exist. And it's really rewarding for the people that do it successfully. So I think it's an awesome thing to do. And I think the thing that holds people back is believing you've got to have it all figured out. You don't. No one does. Whatever for sure. Like I said, to rephrase, there's only one thing for sure you can know, when you start these things out, kind of 3 little rules of entrepreneurism. 1, you're wrong. Whatever you're trying to do, like, you're wrong. It's fine. Accept it. You just know that the general direction is probably going to be good, but whatever you think is going to look like, you're wrong. 2, it'll take longer to get there. However long you think it's going to take, it'll be longer. 3, it'll cost more. However much money you think it's going to cost or whatever difficulty you think you're going to endure, it won't be more. Like, and if you know you're wrong, and then it's going to take longer and cost more, you kind of, and you can set all of your assumptions aside, then I think you have a good probability to be successful and to persevere, because it's one of those old fashioned idioms, like you only quit when you lose. Like, if you just keep going, there's a bunch of organizations I know that persevered for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years without really making it. And then ultimately it all changed.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, when you're going through hell, you just got to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's awesome. So you started the first company. Which was the first company?
So it started as the Pario Systems LLC, which started as a business to consumer aviation company and then became a business to business aviation company. And then along the way, we started a joint venture with a local agricultural company. So the time period in which we couldn't work in ag because my father's keep out expired, we had a lot of experience in the agricultural space. So we wanted to start a new company. So we started this company, Intelligent Agricultural Solutions. And over a period of time, we grew that from a hobby project for a couple of us, on the side of our day jobs, to about a $20 million business. And it started as this joint venture with a local egg company that gave us a place where we had market validation for the product. And we also had an early customer. So we knew that if we made this product, that the manufacturer that we partnered with in creating this joint venture, that would be a place where we could sell the product. And that's validating. It's like, so I'm writing this book now, right? And one of the big problems about writing a book is it's a very review-centric culture, all of us, right? So you think about, you pick up a book, you pick up a new product, these microphones or something, and one of the very first things you're going to do is you're going to look online and be like, how good is this? It's got a couple thousand reviews, 4.6 stars. I believe in this product. How good is this book? Oh, it's got 1,000 reviews and, 4.5 stars. Like, probably, worthwhile to read this book. So you pick up a thing and it's got one review, 5 stars. It's like, well, do you trust that thing? Not so much. Like, nobody really wants to be, many people don't. Like, you've got your early adopter groups, but largely people don't want to be the guinea pig. They don't want to experience the thing the first time. They don't trust it until the masses collectively have said that you can trust this thing. And the same is true a lot of times when you're trying to start a business. It's like, okay, I want to sell this product to you, Gamma the farmer. And like, well, who else is using it? No one, but it's great. It works great in testing. People don't like that. But when you go and say, this manufacturer of these products is installing all of these in the factory, there's 100 people using it this year. There's going to be 200 people using it next year. These are reasonably good sized numbers in the farming world. So then people say, okay, I believe, I'm willing to buy the product because there's enough validation that's overcoming my reluctance and my uncertainty to give me the belief that this product's going to be good, because there's a whole bunch of people using it, ergo it must be good. So I think sometimes when you're starting something out, it can be really helpful where you find that person that's coming with you for the ride as your validation. And sometimes for us, it was a manufacturer that was putting our products on in the factory. It can be a big name distributor. It can be somebody who's going to give you the street credibility that other people in mass can trust the product. We had that right out the gate. That really helped us get moving. But having joint ventures is complicated. It's really, really complicated. And so,
What is that?
well, the idea of some of these businesses. So when you start a joint venture, in this case, it was a 50-50 joint venture. So it's like a marriage, no one person is running this organization. Really. It's a collective understanding of two people that are running the organization. And then what you're hoping to do is just hoping to use some of the capabilities of the organizations that are contributing. And you're hoping to use those capabilities to decrease the amount of investment and expense that you need to get into to launch a new company. So if a company with a great engineering organization and a company with a great manufacturing capability come together in a joint venture, you don't have to hire a whole bunch of engineers. In theory, you can just borrow time from a bunch of the engineers that are already at company A. They can contribute the knowledge to create the product. You don't have to go purchase a factory and all this equipment and hire all this labor. You can just use the fabrication capability from company B. And so company A and B come together and they each bring some capabilities. And then you can start getting products in this new market and brand out that neither one company could have done by themselves. And so the theory is really attractive that way. In practice, it becomes a little complicated because things always evolve. One company in one point has to do a lot more than the other company. That can create some tension. And then as you're successful and this brand really starts to develop an identity of its own and it grows, then you start to hire people into the brand itself. Now Intelligent Agricultural Solutions has its own sales team, and then has its own this and its own that, because it can be the hobby project of a couple people for a while, but then once it's a $10 million business with thousands and thousands of customers, it's not really someone's hobby project anymore. Now it needs like a whole team. And so you have company A and company B, and they don't have their own cultures and their own opinions and stuff. And now you start to grow a third organization in the middle that has neither the culture of A or B, but something different. And that can become a challenge when you're still trying to use the resources from these other companies. You have this sort of clash of cultures and priorities and opinions. And so I think when you do a joint venture, in reality, you should probably plan to be getting it going to a certain point. And then company A and B have kind of launched it almost as seed investors of labor and idea, and you kind of have to let it go. In the same way that a child grows and leaves the home, you've got to sort of let it go off into the world so that the company can flourish, because it creates a lot of tension over a period of time between three organizations that are really collaborating, trying to run one organization. You start to eat a lot of inefficiencies and strain and tension. And so the second company was this joint venture, which was phenomenally awesome and successful. And then we started another joint venture that really worked for a while. It was a joint venture with a distributor on the aviation side of the business and an app company. So we did the electronics, the distributor did the sales, and the app did the aviation customer experience, the thing that the people were looking at in the cockpit in order to use the hardware. And so it was a really good partnership. It took off. We went from nobody had really ever heard of the product. It was a brand new brand to 75, 80% market share nationally. I think we ended up reaching more than 50% of the potentially addressable market. So if you think of a market and all of the people that could exist in the market, and then more than half of them are using your product on a daily, weekly, whenever they're flying basis, the product became incredibly successful. And then as the product was successful, we started to run into tensions and problems. This is always the issue with joint ventures, which is that they, as much as they're like a marriage, they're not a marriage. In a marriage, you have it's a covenant, it's a union, right? You have two people and they come together and kind of become one. A joint venture, in a lot of ways, if you're not really growing and having this company leave, if it's just a combination of resources in order to further some yet separate brand, it's an alliance, not a union. In North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, we're in it for whatever the United States is in. We're a union, right? Wherever the country goes, we go with it. Well, the United States and its allied partners, they're only in it together so long as their interests are aligned. They're always kind of open to the idea of a better deal, with somebody else, where it's better for our interests, which might be at the expense of somebody else's. That potential is always out there. And so what happened is the success created a problem of sorts, where people's interests weren't perfectly aligned after the success was present. Some people wanted more money or felt like they weren't getting a good deal, or, then it became a source of conflict. And ultimately that partnership ended up breaking apart over a period of time, and we ended up buying out all the other partners and running it forward ourselves, because the diversion of interests, was irreconcilable after a number of years in the partnership. So that was the third business. And then as the business was really growing, at one point in time, we decided that we wanted to start sort of our own venture arm, which ended up being, in hindsight, just really not a good decision, because we started two more companies through this venture capability, one of which we sold and one of which ended up being kind of folded up and had failed. And I mean, which is still a pretty good batting average if you think about it. We started 4 companies that either succeeded or were sold and carried onward, and one that didn't end up making it. 80% success rate. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the problem with the venture strategy was just that we were spread too thin, focused in too many areas of focus, not enough resources to complete the jobs that we'd kind of signed up for. I mean, we really stretched ourselves thin. And then, as the business would wax or wane, you'd have focus problems. And then you'd also have challenges where you just weren't capitalized well enough to do all the things that you want to do all at once. And then you end up with difficult decisions, choosing rock or hard place. Something's really gotta succeed and something's gotta suffer. And when you've done so little with so long, or done so much with so little for so long, you kind of feel like you can do anything with nothing. And the team feels that way for a while too. But ultimately you come to a place where that's just not true anymore. And then you've got to make hard choices. And for a lot of leaders, myself included, it's hard to make those choices because you still think you can pull it off. You've done improbable thing after improbable thing after improbable thing. But then you reach a place where like the ask is too big, the reach is too far. You can't really pull it off, and you've got to reconcile difficult decisions. And I think we probably would have grown even faster in some areas if we had not allowed ourselves to get spread so thin, thinking we could be all things to kind of all peoples. So a lot of lessons in all entrepreneurial journeys. I mean, mine's not special in that respect. So those were kind of the 5 businesses over a period of time. And each had their rationality for starting and being pursued, which, and overwhelmingly, they really were good decisions and really worked out well. But later, the more we stacked up, more complexity and more complexity and more complexity, like the more and more challenging it became to make that successful. Simple's powerful. And we made our lives way too complicated toward the end.
What do you think you should have done? Just focus on one simple thing, like one thing, instead of many?
Yeah, I think
one area instead of...
we made one choice along the way that is not a popular choice in growing businesses today and is limiting. And that was that we were going to grow the business organically. We were not going to bring on investor capital. So we wanted to both grow really quickly, and we wanted to do that without giving up any control. Now, one of the problems with trying to do that is when you're growing really quickly, you chew up all the cash that you make. So you make some money, but then you hire a bunch of people to grow faster, and then you use all that money. And then our business was in hard goods, not software. So everything that we would sell had its own inherent cost. You had to purchase the inventory, you had to convert the inventory from raw material into a product. You had to, ship that product. And so by the time you acquired the material and then had to pay your suppliers, that happened a lot more quickly than converting the material into something that you could sell, selling that thing, and then collecting the money, from distribution and from customers. So our cash cycle wasn't one-to-one, so to speak. We were always funding our inventory and our receivables. And as those would climb, as the business would grow 30% per year, 40% per year, you'd always be dancing this edge of, do you have enough cash in the business? And a lot of times we didn't. And that was really stressful. So, our success was a problem. It's a good problem, right? But it's a problem. And a lot of organizations would just go raise a bunch of capital so that you don't have to worry about access to cash because you're growing, and you're profitable, and so on and so forth. But we didn't want to do that, for reasons of control, and then not having to deal with a group of investors telling you what to do with the business. We wanted to just take it as far as fast as we could by ourselves. When the numbers were smaller, when you're $1 million business, a $3 million business, a $5 million business, these were relatively manageable problems. When you're a $30 million business, a $40 million business, a $50 million business, then your cash swings end up, it's the same kind of problem, but rather than, man, I could be $100,000 short this month, it's 2 million or 3 million. The numbers just get really big really fast. And then that becomes a problem in trying to go find the capital to deal with it. The numbers just get scary large. The problems are the same. So we had we raised capital, growing the business further, faster, in less stress would have been easier, but that would have cost us other decisions. I also think that because we wanted to keep growing, we chose to do some things that were good for the business sometimes, but bad for the business other times. We would sell engineering services. So we created a very complicated enterprise where we were selling products, but we were also selling services. So you could hire us to design products, and then we would build you the products. So we were also just selling products in the open market. And being both a product company and a service company is challenging because you are always in a place of resource contention. How do you separate what you use resources for your own products versus resources for customers' products? And then when you're late on delivering their stuff, which happens at times, and then they want you to pull resources from the things you're working on for yourself for their products and services. And the reality was that the services business wasn't very profitable for us. It taught us things. It created a lot of capability for us as a business. We learned how to do a lot of things. We learned how to do a lot of things with other people paying us how to learn to do it, which is great. We became a much smarter organization. We brought all these great capabilities in. But by and large, we lost money on the services business. So it ended up being kind of a tuition fee of sorts for learning how to acquire a bunch of capabilities. And so the very profitable product business was funding our services business. And I think at a certain point, if we had really started to slow down or stop the services business, then and focus more on the high profitable products business, we might have had an opportunity to grow out of things and create a lot more cash in the business. And I think that could have created more stability, because later when the pandemic hit, the challenge of being a services business in an environment where globally all of a sudden cash becomes really constrained. People really want to manage cash. They don't want to, when you're not sure what's happening and the world feels like it's ending, what do? The very first thing you do is stop spending money. Wherever I don't have to spend money, I'm not spending money. And so people just shut off their services business overnight. And then we were sitting on a huge pile of very intelligent people that we knew well and had spent decades and decades training that we couldn't afford anymore, because they would eat us alive, literally, from a cash perspective over the course of a couple of months. So then you got to lay people off. You got to cut the size of the business. You got to do a whole bunch of difficult things that, once you do some of that stuff, damage the culture of the organization in ways that takes years and years to rebuild. And so we really set ourselves up to have a very complicated business that was very brittle. And I think that if you had to make a change differently, it would be about focusing on things that were more profitable earlier, leaning more energy into the higher profitability things, with the idea that margin solves a lot of problems, cash solves a lot of problems, and that if you're more resilient as an organization when you have a larger portion of your business coming from things that you more directly control and are really profitable. And I think that no regrets, right? I mean, we learn a lot from all those decisions. You come out of it a much smarter business person, a much better entrepreneur, better man. But for people that somebody listen to this one to start their own thing, you can take on a lot, but once you've done that, I think you just got to be prepared to make choices, because people's priorities get insane. The word, the root of it is one, meaning one thing. A priority, the idea of priorities in plural is sort of a bastardization of the term. Like if you have 3 priorities, really that's almost a problem. What is your priority? What is the most important thing? People don't know, and they don't want to choose. They want to have 11 priorities. You have no priorities when you have 11 priorities. it's chaos. And so all the complexity created a lot of tension. All these businesses, what's actually important? Was that was something that created some problems over time.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you have a lot of experience in creating businesses, also working with a lot of professionals like engineering, agriculture, and also you have a lot of knowledge in just industry in general. I was seeing something online about when companies create other companies too, like the people that work in one company, they get experience and they can open a different company and they keep going. It's like a family tree almost.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I'm very It's a very cool idea. Do you have any more ideas like that that let you understand the industry or just the economy better?
Yeah. Uh, so there's this kind of group of companies. At one point, I think they were called the Fair Children in Silicon Valley. So there's this place, Fairchild Semiconductor. It was a small group of guys started a semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. That's why they call it Silicon Valley, because that's what the semiconductors were made of. And this Fairchild Semiconductor company got going. And there's this really cool chart. As they grew, like groups of guys would get a different idea. And they decide, hey, we want to make a product like this. That company spawned many dozens of companies, I think a couple hundred, including companies like Intel. They came out of the group of people that stepped off of this organization to kind of create their own thing. And so I think sometimes people don't value how important it is to get, like from an economic development perspective, you're trying to grow your community, you're trying to get going. There's a new thing that is coming out, and there's a group of smart, young, talented people that like that thing, and they start a company. You really want to support those young people in getting after that thing, because if they're really successful and it blows up into be a giant big thing 10 years, 20 years hence, it can create something like another Silicon Valley. You get this emerging area of technology, this new thing to the world, this talented group of smart young people with enough support behind them to grow a thing and make it big. It's not just about that one company, because the people that are talented there that decide that they want to create their own thing, which is good. And that's part of the hardness of being an entrepreneur in the technology space, is you get this stuff really going. You get to know these people, you help train them over a period of time, and then they leave and go start another company. That sucks, right? You're kind of pissed about it.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, over a period of time, it ends up being really good, for the industry, for the community, creating, a cluster of like organizations that are really able to hold a pool of exceptionally talented people in one area. It's really important. And so it's bittersweet, when you see people take off and go do their own thing. But you also want to cheer them on a little bit and hope that they're going to be, successful, see that they may have an opportunity to, create some substantial jobs for the community, some wealth for themselves, solve some real customer problems. And so I think that those clusters are important, and it is difficult to be the first one, to start the thing that nobody else is doing in the spot where you're kind of all alone doing it. But that shouldn't dissuade people. I mean, locally here, Doug Burgum and Great Plains Software turning into the Microsoft campus in town here. That was a person stepping into a space where there was really nobody else doing that kind of thing here that way at the time, and deciding to build something really substantial off of it. And now there's a whole bunch of local organizations that are just connected to the capabilities of that one company that themselves have grown up to be big, awesome things. Your Stone Ridges of the world and the like. I mean, companies that are just in service to creating software to serve the customers of that one large thing, that was started here. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, Ken, but kind of direct.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a place that is perspective building sometimes for people.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a new industry started in a community is a huge deal, and you really want to support that and have it be successful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And obviously, if you're going to be a manager in a company or a founder of a new company, or even just a person at a high level in any profession, um, personal development is part of that.
Yeah.
And I know you're very big about that. And obviously you've learned a lot about, developing yourself, being a better person, being more efficient, being smarter about things, better decisions. Can you tell me some stories of things you've learned that, help you be better, make more, with less effort, or just in general personal development?
I think trying to find great teachers and be a great teacher is an aspiration people should hold always. Uh, there's this thing my dad does that used to aggravate the shit out of me. Oh, so painful. So as an employee of his, when I was young, I would go running into his office. I wanted a decision. We're going to choose between this GPS receiver and another GPS receiver, and I'm struggling because of this one question. What do you think? And rather than get a response from him like, well, it should be GPS receiver A in 5 minutes or less, and I'm out of there, because I've got a laundry list of things to do. I got a to-do list that is 5 pages long, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of checking each one of those things off. And I want my list getting smaller, not bigger every week. And there's stuff that's wanting to come onto it. So I'm fighting checking all these boxes and hammering down this to-do list. And I want an answer. I know, easy, fast, just give me the answer, let's go. And I would never get an answer, ever, from my father. What I would get was a lesson. He would not say it's going to be A for these reasons. He would back up to when GPS was first created and why it was created and how it came together and what the underlying technology looks like and how that technology works and how we should think about it in A thing or B thing. And so I would get a 90-minute run through of GPS from the dawn of GPS time around this one question. And so I'm 85 minutes overdue in walking into this room, and we're not even really talking about the question yet. And it would frustrate me. It was years later that I really kind of realized the talent and the power of what he was doing. It took me a long time. And most of the time, when you find organizations that have a lot of disagreement inside of the organization, there's a lot of friction. Things aren't going particularly well. A lot of these conflicts come down to one of two problems. Number one, it's difference of information. I know things Gamma doesn't know. Gamma knows things I don't know. We're arguing about something because of our differences in information. You know things I don't know, and I know things you don't know. And because he doesn't know what I know. He doesn't know what anybody knows per se. So he would back up to a place where it's very clear, that we're going to get to the basics and we're going to build our way up on this topic to the place that we're now going to come to the decision that we're talking about. And now that we've backed up far enough and given everybody the same information, we're removing the potential for differences in information to create about a bunch of conflict about where we want to go. We all have the same information. I've had a bunch of blanks colored in by him. I've shared some stuff he didn't know, whatever it may be. Everybody's got the same information. That's a big investment to make, and most organizations and most people don't want to make it. You just want instant gratification. You want to be through this thing right now, but you don't develop people that way. You don't develop organizations that way. You develop organizations and people by teaching, by getting everybody to a place where they've got all the same information and then talking about what the decision should look like and why. So one reason people really have a hard time and are in conflict and can't make decisions is because of differences in information. The other is about differences in objectives. Where are we going? Why are we going there? That's the leader's job. Your job as a leader is not to give everybody all the answers. It's to give them direction and to give them context. We need to go here. This is why we need to go here. This is why the direction is important. This is what we hope things are going to look like when we get there. You want to empower and teach people to make decisions, and you want to give them clarity about context and direction. And too often leaders feel like you got to have all the answers. You got to impress everybody with the fact that you know all this crap. You got to be, the guy who's answering all this stuff. But at a certain point in time, one day I was walking across the parking lot between the two buildings in our campus, and we had just reached a point where I think we had 208 full-time employees. And it dawned on me that 208 was the number of working days in the year. And so what that means is if I wanted to run around and do everybody's job today, it was going to take me a year to get to tomorrow.
Wow.
So you can't do it. You can't have everybody's job, have all these answers, and you're going to get a lot further as an organization if you don't set the organization up to be dependent on you, which means you've got to let go of control. You've got to let people make decisions that sometimes you don't necessarily agree with. You've got to try to find that tension and honor that tension between maybe letting people fail sometimes when it's pretty clear to you, but not to them that they're going to. But only letting them fail when it's really not going to damage the mission in a way that's going to be unrecoverable. And so there's all these complexities in leading. And I think that, for me, the thing that I'm still struggling with, is to try to develop myself as that teacher, to be patient, to rewind far enough, to bring enough information to the table to make sure that everybody's on the same page about where we are in the decision that we're trying to make, because it's a discipline that needs to focus a lot more on connecting with people. It's a lot more about relationships. It's a lot more about teaching, and it's a lot less about doing that specific outcome. And it's indirect. It's hard, right? I mean, you just want to do the thing and have it done and move on, but that's not really going to help you in the context of bringing people along and teaching people and having people go with you and really, really win organizationally. And most leaders don't give themselves the time and the flexibility to do it. That 90 minutes it's going to take to answer the 5-minute question Gamma walks in the door for, my schedule's all busy and I'm not going to give him the time and I'm not going to clear it. So rather than do the right thing, which is get everybody on the same page, I'm just going to throw a piece of information at him and have him walk out the door. And some of the worst things that we ended up dealing with in the organization as we were growing it would be when I would get frustrated with people because we weren't getting anywhere, and I would just give people the answers. We'd be struggling about something we needed to change in the process for how we were doing something in the organization. I would be asking people for weeks to get somewhere on it. People would get nowhere on it. I would lose my crap, and I'd just go on the whiteboard and I'd draw people a process and be like, okay, if you can't figure it out, this is what we're going to do. It's going to look like this. Well, now what I've done is created some perceived ownership of mine, or some psychological capital that I have in this random flow chart that I threw up on the whiteboard one day. And then later, when that's really not working for the organization very well, people don't feel like they can change it because it's my thing. And it's Dave's thing. He cares about that. He got all upset about it. We don't want to go challenge him about this thing. And the reality is, I don't give a crap about that thing, that process. I was frustrated we were stuck. The outcome, I could care less about. I don't have any pride of ownership over this stupid flowchart and this method. Like, if we're past it, we're past it. Let's move on. But people don't feel that way. There's fear associated with their perception that I care about the way that this works, and I don't. And so the more you do as a leader in organizations in giving people the perception that you have some pride of authorship or ownership over these different parts of the organization that are going to need to change, the more it holds you back, the more you can't move forward, because people don't have the courage to come up to you and say, that thing that you really cared about 2 years ago really isn't working for us anymore. It needs to change, because they fear your response. And in some cases, unfortunately, that's a rational fear. And a lot of times it's just an irrational fear. People don't like to step into conflict. So they're going to avoid it. And that's going to create, organizational stasis.
Yep. And that's very true. I mean, one person cannot do the work of 208 people, right? And that can lead also to one of the topics I want to talk with you. It's communication. It can also lead to about the book that you're writing right now, which is one of the main things in business and relationships and life. Basically, one of the main things. What do you think are the main things that people get wrong in communication?
Communication is just a useless topic. I think that people do communication wrong a few different ways, big ways. One big way they do communication wrong is believing that it's a one-time game. There's a moment of opportunity for you to communicate a thing that has some, high stakes perception around it. You're going to talk with your partner or your wife, your girlfriend about something that you're really nervous about. You feel like you've got one shot to get it right, and that's it. You're going to go talk to your boss about this one thing that you're really nervous about bringing up, and you don't, if it goes wrong, like you don't really know how, you're just nervous about it because you feel like there's only one moment, and that's bullshit. In reality, there's an opportunity for many times to revisit that. Someone says something to you and you get upset, you can come back to them the next day and say, look, I'm really sorry about how I responded to that thing. I'd like to try that again. You more often than not have an opportunity to revisit that with a cooler head. You have an opportunity to come back to that conversation and clarify things. You have an opportunity to get curious about something that floated past you in that conversation and say, I really feel like I should ask more questions about that, but I didn't. Can you tell me more? These things are almost never like a one-shot deal, and people's anxiety that holds them back from these conversations is attached to the meaning or the stakes that we put with the conversation. So we feel like this conversation's got to go perfectly, or like bad things are going to happen. And so our anxiety ratchets up higher and higher. And like you're nervous and you don't go into the conversation because you're afraid that you won't get the outcome you want. And this is the only time that if you like screw it up, like that's it. And when you remove that bias or that belief, that there's many iterations and opportunities to have a conversation that's related to this thing, and that it can happen, in 10 parts rather than one part, all of a sudden your anxiety drops a lot about getting into that conversation, stepping into that difficult thing. And that's why I feel like that's an important misconception about communication. So I think that's one. I think in business and in relationships a lot right now, people are very concerned with how they look, and they're worried about the wrong things and how they look. So I think people are very worried about looking perfect, and no one is perfect. There are no perfect people. As a result, there's no perfect organizations. And we're all flawed and learning and trying to do the best that we can with what we've got where we are every single day. And so when you're trying to show up perfect, what happens as a result is you're not authentic, because the real you isn't perfect. And you don't form a real connection or real relationship with people because they can't see you. You've put up this veneer of fakery, that the flawed you is trying to stand behind, and this fake you that you're putting forward. And then you worry so much about your curation of this fake you, and like, making it look perfect and concerning yourself with what people think. And then that's especially true leaders, feeling like they can't be both a leader and also be seen as a person. Like you can't have flaws. You can't be a screw up in certain areas. You can't make mistakes. And you do have flaws. You are a screw up in certain areas. You are going to make mistakes. And if you've got the self-awareness to identify those things and to be honest with them about people, it's extremely empowering. The best organizations that I've been a part of weren't the best organizations because they had perfect leaders. They're the best organizations because they had authentic people in leadership. And when they had authentic people in leadership, those people had real connections to the people that worked with them. And you don't do anything in life for an organization. You just don't. You work for XYZ company, like you don't show up and grind and work hard and try to do the improbable or the seemingly impossible in order to advance the interest of some brand. You don't care that much. What you care about is the people. You care about the people you're doing it with. You care about the people that you're inspired by, that took the leap to try to make this thing. You care about them. And so when you go into a situation where you've got a leader who's trying to be perfect in all things to all people, you don't feel connected to that person. And so when the going gets tough, and this person's putting on sort of a veil of perfection that is just clearly not real, and the going always gets tough, then you're not particularly inspired and signed up to undergo great personal difficulty in order to achieve whatever the objective is. But when it's somebody you care about because you have a real connection with them and the going gets tough and you're all sort of in it together, well, then you're really going to go the extra many, many miles in order to try to be successful with this thing, not because you care about the brand, but because you care about the people. And you can only care about people by having a real connection with them. And so I think a lot of leaders get communication wrong because they want to come off a certain way. They want this image of themselves. And my experience is that the sort of the image-centric leaders have the least strength of following and the least connection with the people around them. And they, as a result, have a hard time overcoming really difficult obstacles. The best leaders are people that are authentic in the way that they show up, in the way that they communicate. And they care more about, connection than they do about appearance. Those are transformative leaders. Those are the people that change things, for the world. And I think that's a misconception about communication. Like, don't show up and try to seem a certain way or look a certain way. I think the other thing about communication is people are a lot smarter than they're given credit for. I think that especially when things are going poorly in organizations, there's a predisposition to try to shine that turd up, and make what's an obviously challenging or problematic situation look better or cast it in some better light. And the reality is people can typically see through that. And it makes you seem very dishonest as a leader in communicating. So I think that the hard things sometimes are communicating the hard things and doing it well. And I think that's just about being honest. It's about being, really straight with people. You don't have to be brutal in your candor, but you do need to bring the candor and tell people what the problem is and, what you think is the right thing to do in getting through it. But if you want to overcome some of those problems, communication is always a bidirectional thing. And you want people to feel and be really seen. So when you're in a situation with an organization that's undergoing challenges and there's problems, what you really want to do is you want to put the problem on the table and you want to give people the context and the clarity for the direction that you want to take in solving the problem. And then you want to give people the opportunity to take some ownership over what that solve's going to look like. You don't need to show up as the white knight leader, always having the answer for how to overcome the problem. You don't want to really. Because if you want people to be bought into whatever the difficulty that's going to look like coming forward, you want their intelligence, their expertise, the group of people is going to come up with a better solution than you can by yourself. And two, they're not going to feel particularly any ownership or a sense of interest in making sure things go well. If it's just this, seagull manager sort of coming in and crapping on everybody with exactly what they've got to do in this problem, you want people to really own that. So this is what I think we should do. Them to get behind the direction and the solution. You want them to tell the organization how to overcome the problem and how to come through it. And I think there's people that from a leadership perspective feel like it's a loss of face or some respect for them in times of difficulty not to have all the answers. You don't want to. The best organizations don't have leaders that do have all the answers. They have leaders that have mastered the fine art of keeping clarity and direction and keeping people connected to what's actually going on in the business and how it's going and what the real problems are, and being really clear about priorities and direction are the fundamental things people need to concern themselves with communicating. So, those are some brief areas of communication. I think that another thing that people get wrong in communication in a personal sense is people are really always concerned with how you look, right? So you really worry about what other people think of you. You're concerned about what are they going to think? What are they going to say? And the reality is people don't think about you very much. It might be damage to your ego, but run yourself through that filter. Like, think about, the 24 hours in your day and how many of those hours are spent painstakingly considering, somebody else. Not many. And mostly we think about ourselves. So when it comes to being afraid of making a decision, making a change, doing something, and you're really kind of worrying yourself with what is everybody going to say or what is everybody going to think, largely they're not going to say much or think much because they're mostly concerned about themselves. And if they're not people that support you moving in the direction that you want to take personally, professionally, whatever, if they don't love you and want you to win, then you don't necessarily want them along for the ride anyway. And so we so often end up just paralyzed by our inability to move forward in some area because we're so afraid of what somebody might think or say. And the reality is when you finally come around and you do it, you make the choice, you make the change, you do the thing, the response is never the kind of thing that you feared, or were concerned about. You are almost always find much more support, much more positivity, and also much less interest than you did when you were afraid of it. And I think that that's really empowering to remind people about in the area of making decisions, communicating decisions. So communication's a big topic. I think in the area of communication too, there's a really powerful turn of phrase that you can steal from Brene Brown that goes, "The story I'm telling myself." So a lot of times we struggle to communicate, like when we're not feeling awesome about something in a relationship. It can be professional, it can be personal. This works in all circumstances. So you're upset because somebody has been acting in a way that like just isn't cool, right? I mean, they're not giving you the support, they're not giving you the attention, they're doing something that even though you've said don't do that, they seem to repeat that over and over and over again. And so you are raging, right? And your predisposition is to come and say like, you always do this bad thing, or I don't understand why you keep doing this bad thing, or you come out and you say, you, Gamma, the problem is you. That's where it starts, right? Your very first utterance is just like, you have a problem. You are a problem. And what happens immediately is people get defensive. I've been attacked, right? You've said I'm a bad dude. You've said I'm doing bad things. Like you've come at me saying like something about me is not right, personally, professionally, whatever. What am I going to do to defend myself? And so you have an instant argument. You know it's coming, right? And a lot of people don't bring these things up because they know the argument's coming. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be an argument. And the way that you pull the rug out from under that argument and you make it a conversation instead of an argument is you don't make an accusation. You don't use the word you to start anything in a conversation where you want to undertake fixing some kind of conflict. You make it about you, not the other person, like me. I'm going to start with me. So it goes, the story I'm telling myself. So the story I'm telling myself is you never come to meetings on time because you don't respect my time and the rest of these people's time, and it pisses me off. Well, I haven't said you do this to piss me off intentionally. You don't care about other people's time. I've said that's the thing that I'm telling myself. That's my narrative. Then you create the space to say, no, that's not what's happening. I have this other meeting that my other boss or whatever makes me attend, and it always runs long and it's in a different building and I just can't get here on time, and I don't, I can't cancel on either of you guys. And so I'm like stuck in the middle of this thing. Will that give somebody the opportunity to fill the space in a way where they don't feel accused? They're given an opportunity to clarify. The story I'm telling myself is, that I've done something wrong because you've been cold and distant and you barely looked at me the last 2 days at all. Well, it's not like, hey, you're cold and distant and you're being mean to me, and you're not being transparent with me about something that I've done, that's upset you. Instead, it's about, I'm concerned. I have an issue with my anxieties or my concerns, and I'm going to give you the space to talk about those things in a way where you're not on the defensive. And so this turn of phrase, the story I'm telling myself, is an opportunity to walk into all kinds of personal and professional conflicts in a way that doesn't start things as an attack that requires a defense, but then maybe also gets some counterattack that requires a defense. It's just an opening for an opportunity for someone to share information that clarifies the situation and makes the actual problem more clear. It creates the space to solve problems, instead of creating new ones. So I've really liked that turn of phrase. It's helped me in some challenging situations personally and professionally. It's one I'm big proponents of. And I think that when it comes to communicating negative things or challenging things, largely we don't. And it's bad because we fear the conflict. And it's like a deeply wired innate thing for all of us. You want to be accepted by the group. You want the group to take you on. Thousands and thousands of years ago, if the tribe didn't accept you and you were expelled, well, that's death, right? You're dead meat by yourself out there in the wilderness. We're like deeply wired to need people's acceptance and to fit in. And, we don't want to take on some conflict because we might not fit in. People might not accept us. This might become a problem. And so our predisposition is to avoid conflict until we're pushed into it. And that's a really, really bad thing. From a leadership perspective, it's a crazy number. It's something like 25% of managers won't give any kind of negative feedback at all. They're just too uncomfortable with it, which is horrifically unfair to their employees, because how are you going to grow? I mean, think back on some moment in your life that changed you for the better. And I bet there was somebody connected to that moment, some authority figure, some adult figure telling you, not good enough, you're better than this, try harder, I have high expectations for you, and I know that you can meet them. And then you are inspired to rise and to meet those expectations. And so all of these people with these managers that don't have the courage to tell them what they're not doing well, are having an unsatisfactory experience because they're not getting very good direction, and they're not given the opportunity to grow, and because they're not being told what they need to do to grow. And so you're kind of robbing somebody of the opportunity for transformation when you don't give them that negative feedback. And a lot of people don't do it because they just don't know how. And I think it's easier than people think. You sit down and you say, I have high expectations and I know you can meet them, and so I'm going to give you some feedback about where I think you can do better. And it looks like this. So it starts with belief. I believe in you and I know you can do something impressive. So I'm going to tell you what you've got to do to change, my opinion, in order for you to get there. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable stepping into that conversation because of the conflict, because they don't know what to do if it goes poorly, because they feel like they've only got one shot. And at the end of the day, you've always got more than one opportunity to take a conversation on with somebody.
The leadership, communication. Something I've learned from you, actually, I've been using lately is curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity is such a, instead of anger, you could replace it with curiosity. That's so useful. Like somebody cuts you off you're driving, somebody cuts you off, you could just think to yourself, why did you do that? Instead of just attacking, right? And it's such a little change that you can do and just opens so many things.
Yeah, curiosity is a powerful thing. And I think that if the world were a lot more curious, we'd get a lot further, less judgment, more curiosity. So this employee does something, your partner does something, your child does something. And I think the reality is that most people really want to do well with everything in their life. Nobody wakes up in the morning like, you know what? I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to suck as much as possible today. Like I'm going to try to turn today into the largest train wreck that I can possibly assemble. It's going to be great. People don't wake up wanting to be that way, to do that way, not to have an outcome like that. People wake up wanting to do well. And so if they aren't doing well, it's because they can't. And so when you get curious about why can't this person do well, that starts to bring a different perspective. You learn pretty interesting things like, hey, I'm not getting the support, I'm not getting the communication, someone's not being accountable for their responsibilities. Okay, well, why not? It's probably not because they just don't want to, because they want to fail at these things. It's because they are struggling somehow. So when you get curious about that struggle and where it's coming from, it has a tendency to take you into some really interesting places that for your relationships end up really mattering. Because I think a lot of times, we are gambling with things that you can't kind of purchase replacements for. We're just not being attentive to relationships with people, our children, our friends, our partners, and we don't treat those relationships with the care that we should. And, we don't get curious about people's lives and foster connections with them. We go through life too much on a transactional basis, either delivering things that we feel like we need to deliver to people in our lives out of some sense of obligation, or alternatively trying to extract value from these relationships that's going to be like unilaterally good for us. Like we're, the very definition of using people, and people don't like to be used, to feel used. And so I think there's a crisis of connection in a lot of places in society right now, because there's a lot of people that feel like what you've got to do is kind of be in it for yourself, out for yourself, always kind of you above all others. And I think it's a shallow and sad way to live. It's when you transcend yourself and life becomes about more than just you, then life becomes much richer. Paradoxically, kind of when you lose yourself as the center of all of it, like you grow to be, much bigger and much better. One of the many challenging paradoxes of life.
Definitely. And, after being an entrepreneur for so many years, what motivated you to start writing a book? And how's that going so far?
Well, it's a challenging thing to answer succinctly. So I started writing a book because I'd always been curious about it. I've always wanted to do it. And I started writing a different book. I thought I would write a children's book. I'd do something sort of fun and light. And now I'm writing a book about something entirely different. So you start with a children's book, and how do you find your way from children's book to, a nonfiction narrative about changing men's gender roles in society. So the working title of the book that I'm working on right now is called Broken Roles, Men's Job Description in the Post-Provider Era. So I started writing the book because I ended up feeling called to write the book. I ended up running into a lot of situations where I was helping people. Guys that were being kind of brought into my life, someone coming to me and saying, hey, I got a guy I know, and he's going through a divorce, or feels like he might need to go through a divorce. His relationship's in a bad spot. I was through a divorce this year, and it was murderously difficult to go through. And there's, it's hard to find people that can connect with you emotionally about those things. So because it's traumatic. And I think once you experience a certain amount of trauma, you go through life in this place where things just feel different for you than I think for a lot of other people in society. It's like, before trauma, you can experience a range of emotions. It's about, this big. And then after trauma, your range of emotions just grows to be bigger. Your highs get higher, your lows get lower. You live life in a world of greater emotional amplitude. And so things that seem minor to some people seem major to you. Little reminders of past hurts can make that old hurt really severe, old, nasty, emotional pain come back to you in a real way. And, for many, many years through the middle part of the last century, there's these two organizations, the Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And so it'd be this bar, this club, this VFW type of thing. And a guy could walk in there having experienced the trauma and difficulty of war, which is something that neither you nor I can appreciate. And it's an unknowable thing for us, the difficulty that those men lived through. But they could sit down and a guy from World War II and a guy from Korea, even though in a different war, maybe different branches of the military, there's a certain shared emotional experience there that other people can't have and you can't describe to them, that once you sit down with those people, that there's a camaraderie and a support there that you can't find elsewhere. And I think that when it comes to people that have experienced traumatic and emotional interpersonal things, I think there's a lot of guys like me that are going through a situation where what life is expected of them in the past was, hey, show up and do your job as a guy, provide for your family, that base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the resources for your family to live and live well, do that. That's your job. And that's not what people expect of men anymore. But no one has really said what they do expect now. So the old deal is out, like, hey, you're not the providers anymore. Women can provide well for themselves. And it's true. I mean, women have effectively closed the pay gap. They're better educated than men. They've got, in a lot of ways, better social structures and support, both in their willingness or predisposition to go to therapy, their connectedness and number of friends. Like, they've got better supporting resources. They're better educated. They're making just as much money. Women don't need men to provide for them anymore. And so now it's in this place where it's like, well, I don't know. People love sports analogies, so let's try one out. So imagine, you've got a basketball team, right? There's different roles in the team. You've got guys that shoot outside. You've got guys in the paint, and just because you are a guy on the inside in the paint, that's your specialty and that's what you do, and you've become really good at it, it doesn't mean that's all you do, right? And so, yeah, you could shoot outside. You're just not particularly good at it, and other people are good at it, so they do it. And sports evolve over a period of time. You look at basketball in the 1950s and basketball today, the game looks pretty different. You look at football in the 1950s and football today, and the game looks really different. These things go through sort of iterations and evolutions, change. And so what's expected of the players, the role players in the game, and the skills that they need changes over time too. Well, now what's happened is, the specialized skills that we had, well, now there's other people in the team that have both other skills we don't have, and they do the stuff we used to do just as well as we do. So while it's easy to feel obsolete like that, and the way through that isn't to, rail against the fact that these other people have gotten skills that you used to have and were your special skills. It's like, oh no, that's not the point. The point is they've got a broader spectrum of skills that they're really, really good at. We have a narrow spectrum of skills that are redundant. So we need to have a broader spectrum of skills. Like, our skills need to grow in response to the way that, expectations in society have evolved. And so we need to give the guidance and the information and the tools and the resources for people to grow those skills. And then starts with a conversation. It starts with pointing people in the right direction about these skills. And for me, I had a conversation with a series of friends that either were having problems in their relationships, or they heard about, had questions for me. We talked about relationships in general, got some of my philosophy or some of my experience with it, and then pointed other men in my direction that I ended up helping out through a series of many different coffees. And at some point, I had a friend ask me, about the book I was writing, and it was observing all of these activities and these conversations I was having with people, and I'd helped a couple of this friends out, and was asked the question, well, are you sure you're writing the right book? Because the book of fiction and kind of fun that you're doing over here, I think that you've got experience and information that could help a lot of guys out. Maybe you should be writing that book instead. And so I took that home and I sat with it for a while, and I thought, what, the Lord seems to continue to kind of push people at me in this direction. And a lot of times I feel like I'm not entirely perceptive. I think things do happen for a reason. Life unfolds in a certain way. And if you are observing it and you're going with the flow of your life, you can see a lot of opportunities to make your life go faster. So, and it can be more exciting. It's like, rafting your way down a river, right? There's these rapids and currents and stuff. And a lot of people don't like the direction it's going, where they see the rapids coming. And so they just furiously try to like paddle upstream against this current that's dragging them down. And they spend all of this energy trying to change the direction of where everything in their life is trying to take them. And they just get dragged through it, kicking and screaming anyway. and it's not a very good experience. But if you turn that around and you focus more on navigating them and propelling yourself quickly through them and going forward with the flow of these things in your life, then I feel like a lot of times your life can be exciting and fun and doesn't feel as like effortful and straining and awful and difficult. It seems exhilarating. And for me, I kind of felt like things kept pushing me in a direction where, okay, I decided to write a book and things kept pushing me at this topic. And it's like, well, yeah, if it ends up being catharsis for me and just an opportunity to tie a bow on, all the things that I've needed to learn about showing up as a better man, that's a value. If I help a few other guys, that's great. If I help a lot of other guys, that's aspirational. Help other people through the same kind of difficulties that I was going through. And the second piece of that gamma is that you spend 20 years as an entrepreneur growing super fast-paced businesses, and it is consuming. It can eat your life. It ate mine. And my girls are 14 and 12 and 9 right now, and I've lost a lot of access to my kids in the divorce. So you wake up one day and you realize that you only have 50% of the nights, that you were going to have accessible for you with your kids between here and their adulthood. And it's a massive loss. It really sucks. It hurts. And so now all of a sudden, scarcity just has this effect on people. Like you start to see that time with your kids differently. And yes, I think if I pursued starting another high growth tech business, I could probably do it. I could probably do it successfully. I could probably make a lot of money at it, because I've had a track record of doing it pretty successfully. And I think that, and I might even have some fun doing it, but I also don't have necessarily the confidence that I can do that at this point in time without falling back into old habits where I'm not as physically or emotionally available for all the people that matter in my life. And you start to see that there's not maybe as much time. You have this, idea that you're always going to have the time, and it's not true. Neither you nor I may make it home alive from this podcast conversation. It's one extreme, right? But that's how uncertain life is. That tomorrow is something that you always take for granted, as it's always going to be there for you, but that may not be true. And so when you stop taking some of these things for granted, which happened to me when I saw all this time taken away, then all that time became really valuable. And so I want to have something that I'm doing professionally that can help people and be useful. And I want to also do that in a way that gives me the flexibility that if I need to be available for my kids, or I can turn up the intensity of my professional life during one week and then back it back down a lot during the next week, because I have a lot of schedule control. And I think when you find yourself in a place where you are in a different, job, some startup business, et cetera, you give a lot of control over your schedule away when you do that. And I was very reluctant to leap right back into that. So I think I needed some time to process like all the stuff that I've been through in my life for a long time. I wanted an opportunity to contribute, to help people. I was trying to pay attention to the signs in my life that were saying, this is a place where perhaps I might be called to be of some service. And so far I think it's been a really good experience for me. I've come to realize as I've been doing it that it turns out that being an author is a lot like being an entrepreneur. Because when I was a kid, if you wanted to get a book, you would wheel up to a bookstore, you'd walk in there, you'd wander around the stacks, you'd find a book, and you would leave with it. It's the pre-Amazon days, or when Amazon was first getting started, and you would go to a distributor, to a retailer. That's where you would find books and you would purchase books. And that's not where lots of books are purchased today. A lot of people don't even physically buy books anymore, right? You listen to a book or you read a book on your phone. And so now the business of being an author is a lot different. So how do you, get your book connected to distribution, make your book available for people, have people hear about the book? It's much more so today that distribution doesn't so much sell books as authors sell books. And so it's a little bit of a journey for me to try to figure out, how much do I want to undertake the exercise of trying to build a platform for myself, which is a challenging and time-consuming thing to do at a whole nother scale. And how much do I really want to, worry about the book getting out there? Because the war for me is the more energy I put into trying to build the platform, the less I put into the book. So there's a tension there. But the less energy I put into the platform, the less accessible the book becomes. Because if I believe that the book can be helpful for guys, and I do believe that that's true, then I want it to be available. I want people to know that it exists. And absent a platform, how are people going to know that? Because most guys aren't going to wander into a bookstore. They're not going to, rock up to some shop and find this book. So unless it is put in front of them somehow, through some social media they're scrolling or somebody that they talk to, then, largely the book could end up being a very, quiet exercise that ultimately doesn't get very far. So there's a lot of energy that goes into involved in starting it, in the same way that you start a new brand or start a new company, starting a book, it's feeling like that in a lot of ways, man. So, but it's a cool experience. And I think it's also indicative of that whole, thing we were talking about a little bit earlier, maybe not in a direct way, but, we, a lot of times we have a tendency not to change or do something differently in our lives because, we are accustomed to a thing. It doesn't mean it's good. A lot of times it's not good, but we're used to it. So people are in a relationship that's not healthy. People are in a job that's not healthy. People are in, a circumstance in their life that is undoubtedly not good for them. And you look at those people and you say, well, why don't they change something? Why don't they do something different? Clearly, they've got to know that this isn't all that's there for them, that this isn't the only person, that this isn't the only job, that they could make some choice that would change the circumstance that they're in. And people know that to be true intellectually. It's, but emotionally, it's a different thing, because we like the idea of certainty. We like the idea that we know what's going to come next, because even if it sucks, if we're used to it, we've proven to ourselves that we can survive the sucky thing that we know is coming next. But what we don't know is if we make a change, what if it sucks more? What if for a period of time things become more difficult? They go in a direction that I don't know. I don't know for sure that I can handle the thing that could be worse than this. And so people discount the idea that actually it could be a lot better, and they settle for making their screwed up, crappy past like their perpetual future, instead of looking for something that could change their future, make their life a lot better, and being willing to take some of that uncertainty on and live in that discomfort of what's really not knowing what's going to come next, right? And I think that that's even my challenge with the book, right? Because a lot of people, you wander up like, hey, you're starting a tech business up, sounds pretty risky. Yeah, it is really risky, right? Sounds pretty difficult. Yeah, it is pretty difficult. But it's the 6th time I've done it. So all of that difficulty, all that risk, all of the challenges and heartache and pain that comes with starting some new business, I know what that looks like. And so I know what to expect. Yes, psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, I can see all the steps and what comes next. But then this whole book thing, I have no idea what's coming next. And there's times where that's really exhilarating and fun, and I really enjoy it. And there's times where it is the biggest pain in the ass and is so goddamn frustrating. And I want to throw up my hands and be like, screw this friggin' book. I'm just going to go start another business. I know exactly how to do that. And I'm confident I'm going to win. And and that tension is waxes and wanes. It's like ever present right now in my life. So I got into the book because I wanted schedule flexibility. I wanted to be maximally present with my daughters. I wanted to be able to, longer form, really think through and process a bunch of the challenging stuff I've been through in my life in the last few years. And I wanted a little bit of a new adventure. And those truths we were talking about earlier, takes longer, costs more. All those things turn out to be true in the area of writing a book. Too, it's a more time-consuming endeavor that takes a lot longer to do and do well than I anticipated. But 85,000 words into it, and I've learned a hell of a lot. along the way. So it's been a good ride.
That is awesome. So, Dave, thank you for your time. I do have some. Let's see. You've been an entrepreneur for 20 years or more, right? You deal with a lot of professionals. What advice would you give to young people that want to either, this twofold, right? Entrepreneurship, they want to start businesses and be an entrepreneur, and professionals that are maybe engineers starting out, or any other profession that you have experience dealing with or know people in. What do you what advice would you give to them to make the right path or maybe get the most out of their career? And entrepreneurs, what kind of advice? We kind of covered that already a little bit. What kind of advice? Starting out,
Study out.
23, 20 years old, 20, 24 years
I
old.
mean, stuff that's probably common for both. Talk to people. I mean, yes, have relationships and get to know people that are of your sort of generation, age group, people in a relatively close proximity. Like, have a network of people that you're talking to about stuff, and not just work stuff, but the life around work stuff too. When there's tensions between work and life and how people are handling those things, like worry about and concern yourself with relationships, but then expand those relationships to people that don't fit that mold. So get yourself into a situation where you're talking to people that are 10 years, 20 years older than you about stuff that isn't like, hey, what are my job responsibilities on Tuesday, but really more about life and business and not the tree level stuff, like the forest level stuff, really the larger dynamic of everything that's going on. Read a lot. I mean, the one thing that connects every single really interesting, successful, like impactful person that I have ever met in my entire life is they all read. It's, it doesn't matter what industry, doesn't matter what occupation, like the really fantastically talented, impressive, successful people in the world all seem to be pretty well-read people. And, the common thing that people would like to throw out there is like, I don't have time to read. It's like, well, that's bullshit. I mean, everybody's got time to read. We've all got the same amount of time. If Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and some of these other guys who I'm sure have a lot of things that are wanting to like take time from their days, if there's no shortage of people lined up wanting a little bit of their time, they find time to read on a regular basis. You can find time to read on a regular basis. It's not a problem of time. It's a problem of priorities. You just don't want to a lot of times because you don't see the value, but you need to put the time into educating yourself and growing. And so, I mean, people wanting to start out for an entrepreneurship perspective, find some other entrepreneurs, people that actually have done a thing or they are doing a thing, have that be a little network. People that are currently doing it, have done it, talk to them about it. There are some things that are just always true about all entrepreneurial things. It's part of everybody's journey. The shape's a little different from business to business, but the cycle is exactly the same. Half a dozen times or so into this, it's like I can expect, I have a clear expectations for what sort of each round of all these things looks like, because I've been there so many times before, and there are people that feel the exact same way about that. There's a lot of people out there that have done it. So have a network of people. Just, I mean, you don't need to have all the answers. You won't have all the answers. If you get an inclination to do it, just do it. And the truth is that your basic needs in life are a lot easier for you to have provided for you than a lot of people appreciate. It's like, I can't do it because, of loss aversion or risk. It's like, I can't do it because I could lose my income, or I could lose this, or I could lose that. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you get a lot of schedule control. You lose some, but you have the ability to create a lot of value and wealth, both for yourself and for the world. If you want to be more of an owner of your life than an employee of it in a lot of ways, in your personal decisions, and you get a lot more in life economically by being an owner instead of an employee. And so I think that it's the kind of thing that if people have got the predisposition to do it, I would always encourage people to try, especially young, because even if you screw up horrifically, you know what, there's just a lot of time left in your life. The second thing, in the area of advice, professionals, engineers, etc. If you're inclined just to go out and work and get some experience, which is a fine thing to do, I encourage people to go to a smaller business. not go work in some Fortune 50 business or some, Fortune 100 business, some giant enterprise. Go work someplace small, someplace really small and trying to grow. Because when you do that, you are forced to put yourself in a lot of different environments and challenges. You've got to not just write code on some team, but you also have to talk to customers. You also have to talk to the support people. You've also got to work on processes in the company. You've also got to solve these other problems that are not just this one technical problem that you are connected to. You've got to help solve the problem of making the whole company successful. And that makes you so much better rounded as a professional, because if you think about the skills that ultimately get you where you want to go in life, you can just show up and code, but people that really go a long way is they're also able to represent an abstract idea to people and get them behind it. They have sales skills, they have marketing skills, they're able to relate to people in a non-technical context about how to translate the technical problem into something that's got to happen operationally for the customer, from the service perspective, or for the company from an execution perspective. And so the people that develop those skills have a tendency to be able to go really far. I also find that you learn a lot faster in small organizations because there's less structure holding you back. And so you meet people that have grown up in high growth small businesses 5 years into their career, and you meet people that are 10, 15 years into their career in these big structured businesses. And the guys that have been doing it for 5 years without a lot of structure, solving a zillion problems by themselves, going super fast and growing, they are typically better than the people that have spent 10 years, 15 years in this big structured organization, because they've had to do so much more with so little resource that they've had to solve a lot of problems and develop skills that a lot of people in these bigger companies never have to develop. And so they become extremely marketable. So you can spend a much smaller period of time in a smaller organization and then market yourself to a bigger organization and skip level those people both in capability and skill. In a lot of ways, you become, really marketable. But I think a lot of times after you've had that experience, you don't want to work with those organizations anyway, because they're slow, they're stodgy. The rewards can be substantial, economically, but then, the opportunity can be stagnating. That's a word. It can make you feel like you're not getting anywhere, really slow your life down. And take some of the joy and the challenge and the sort of uncertainty and exhilaration, from it. It's getting out of that, whitewater, raft that we were talking about before, and getting into some, giant ship where you can't feel the water anymore, and you're going very slowly, and you got very little control, and it's like, well, you're going to get there, and it's going to be kind of a comfortable ride, but it's going to take a lot longer, and it might be a lot less fun. And I think that, putting a focus on enduring enjoyment in what you do is a lot more important than, the economics of what you do, because there are no guarantees. And if you plan your life reasonably well from a financial perspective and make good decisions, you'll be fine. Anyway.
Dave, it's been awesome. Dude, my pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being in the podcast. Where can people find you if they want to follow you online or book?
At Dave the Author, Dave_the_author on Instagram, or Blue Sky, or find me on LinkedIn, Dave Batcheller, or DaveBatcheller.com, DaveTheAuthor.com, both of those places as well. So keep track of what I'm doing. I publish some articles, talk about things in the social sphere as best I can, both keeping people apprised about the book and what's going on there, but also sharing little things that I'm learning along the way, things that don't fit in the book that I feel like might be useful for people. So just trying to be a service.
Yep, definitely. And Medium too. That's where you post your
Medium too, so yeah.
LinkedIn and Medium.
Absolutely.
Great articles.
Thanks, man.
Dave, you're willing for the team part of it.
All right.